This is Monkey D. Luffy. He's had a rough 2 years separated from the Straw Hats, gained a little weight, and developed a crippling alcohol addiction, but I'm pretty sure this is him. And even if I'm not, he certainly did have the world convinced, because in reality, gasp, this is three-tongued Damaro Black, a villain whose run starts and concludes within the span of 5 chapters, which sounds way too short to make a full video on, but I have always been a huge fan of this guy. I think the fan base impression of him as being a complete joke, and it's not entirely wrong, but Oda put so much work into every aspect of Damaro Black, work that goes unnoticed. He represents a lot of clever ideas, masked by an impenetrable layer of blubber, but today we will penetrate. Because we are on a mission to rank every major antagonist in the most comprehensive and exhaustive way possible, video by video, this time featuring the Luffy we have at home, Damaro Black, who I should say is a very tricky antagonist to rank, because what he does is he fills the void that Luffy left when he went off to go training with big animals during the 2-year time skip, which left Luffy's identity up for grabs, and it was grabbed by this, this. And the primary idea behind this villain is to explore how the world sees Luffy. We as readers and watchers see Luffy as this pure being in it for the adventure, the friends, and the dreams. But that's not how characters within the One Piece world view Luffy. Because according to all of the world government and Big Bird propaganda, Luffy is an evil being, ruthlessly pillaging and trying to destroy global stability because he's a dick. So in world, Damaro Black is actually far more accurate to how the citizens of the One Piece planet view Luffy. A very bad man doing all sorts of very bad man things, like destroying any slobby, breaking the Impel Down prisoners out to wreak havoc on the world, and all the way up to modern day, when it was reported that he took Dr. Vegapunk hostage. What a fiend. So you meet Damaro Black, and yeah, it seems like he's capable of doing all of these horrific things. And he also fits the profile of a more stereotypical pirate. So if you're a random dude in One Piece, it's very easy to believe that he is who he says he is. And that's why, as ridiculous of a caricature as he is, the world accepts Damaro Black in the role of Luffy. And it's not just random citizens who vaguely keep up with the news. Even the Marines believe that this guy is the real deal. A couple of them comment that, hey, Luffy looks a little bit different, doesn't he? But no, that can't be right. This is definitely Straw Hat Luffy. And this often gets neglected, but it needs to be said how much Damaro Black didn't just fool the citizens and the Marines, but also fellow pirates. At his recruitment gathering, we have a pirate admiring him, stating, "It's like a dream come true." The infamous pirate who wreaked havoc on the 3 greatest facilities of the world government, Enisobi, Impel Down, and Navy headquarters, which shows just how much of an inspiration Luffy is, not just to the kind-hearted people of the world, but also to the various nefarious villains of the world. They see his infamy as reported by the world government, and they go, "Mate, good job. One day, I hope to be as much of a prick as he is." And I don't know if this is the right word, but Damaro Black is like a reflection of Luffy. Everything's kind of the same, but it's all flipped and wrong. Or maybe a shadow cast by Luffy. Something that sort of resembles him, but is much more abstract. Which means that Damaro Black has very unique criteria for success in this video, which is that to judge how good of a villain he is, we need to determine just how well he does his job of contrasting Luffy, as well as the ultimate goal of Luffy taking back his identity and his glorious return to form. And just briefly on that, he's not introduced in the manga as Damaro Black. Eiichiro Oda introduces him as Captain Monkey D. Luffy and crew. He does that to the readers through a narration box. So even Oda is acknowledging that in this world right now, this is Luffy and the Straw Hats. So let's talk aesthetics. To his credit, it does look like Damaro Black did actually scar himself to take on the role of Luffy, but to give him less credit, he got it completely wrong. I mean, he tried, but it was the easiest possible thing to get right. The scar under the face. Luffy has 2 vertical lines, but for whatever reason, Damaro Black did 3. He also has an X-shaped scar on his stomach, which is notable because Damaro Black would not have known about Luffy's X-shaped scar on his chest. So there's some coincidental attention to detail there. And all in all, yeah, it's a comically lazy effort to cosplay Luffy. But what Oda does with his personality is sculpted to misshapen perfection. And Damaro Black's actions are a callback to many of the most iconic moments in One Piece. The most obvious one is when fake Robin and her real cucumber get captured. And remember that Luffy declared war on the world government and invaded any slobby just to get Robin back. And later on, he invaded Whole Cake Island to get Sanji back. There is nothing that Luffy wouldn't do for a member of his crew. But when Damaro Black hears that Robin was captured by Cypherpole agents, he more or less says, who cares? We have like 100 of those pirate things already. We don't need her. So that contrast is pretty easy easy to spot, but there are much more subtle as well as much more powerful callbacks as well. One of the most iconic moments in One Piece will always be Jaya, when Luffy and Zoro were beaten by Bellamy and his pirates in the Mocktown Bar. It's a fantastic showcase of how much Luffy has grown to take on the philosophy of Shanks, who had the same thing happen to him in Chapter 1 at the hands of Hickam the Bear, which is a sign of maturity. Figures like Luffy and Shanks don't raise their fists over minor issues. In the words of Shanks, "You can pour drinks on me, you can throw food at me, you can even spit on me. I'll just laugh that stuff off. But good reason or not, nobody hurts a friend of mine." And speaking of spitting, there's a pretty rank part of Jaya where Bellamy spits his drink out at Luffy and Zoro and they still do nothing. Because so what? Bellamy and his crew aren't actually threatening them, so they can mock all they like because he's not a threat to their friends or their dreams. Now cut to Damara Black and he is the complete opposite, because the same thing happened to him on Sabadi. He gets beaten up in a bar by Nami and Usopp, and instead of laughing it off and moving on, Damara Black takes great offense at this act, and revenge becomes his main driving force. Because status is the only substance he possesses, he is all about that superficial respect. Unlike Luffy and Shanks, he doesn't have anything to fall back on. So he gathers his forces and he states, "I summoned you here for one reason. Your precious big boss," that's me, "has been insulted by a bunch of nobodies. They're still somewhere on the island. Find them and bring them to me." So TLDR, bro got his feelings hurt. And he couldn't laugh it off. I mean, mate, this guy could never be a joy boy. He is a very sad boy. And the fact that Damara Black even has extended forces is another masterstroke by Oda. After Luffy picking up his straw hats, one of the very first panels we see in the post-time skip era is a poster stating that the straw hats are recruiting, that notorious Captain Monkey D. Luffy is indeed alive, and they plan to expand their crew in order to plunder the New World. Essentially, Damara Black is trying to build his own grand fleet, and he's doing it a whole 200 chapters before Luffy would have the opportunity to do the same thing. So what Oda's done here is show a contrast between Damara Black and Luffy that we don't even know about yet, because when given this opportunity, Luffy declines the Grand Fleet offer, stating that it'll cramp my style, which all has to do with the philosophy of freedom. Luffy doesn't want to be tied down to these forces, and he doesn't want these forces to be tied to him. That's just not freedom. But Damara Black has to tie other people to him. He doesn't have what it takes to be a decent force in the New World, so whether he realizes it or not, Damara Black is adopting the buggy model of using his status to have much stronger people fight on his behalf. So he's following in the footsteps of a literal clown, and Buggy isn't the only antagonist that Damara Black embodies, because I think he more strongly resembles Blackbeard, another character who is set up to be an antithesis of Luffy, because you can sum both Damara Black and Damara Blackbeard up in 3 words, those words being guns, booze, and women. Damara Black and Blackbeard are both notorious drunkards who favor excessive use of firearms, which is relevant because Luffy never uses guns. Not in the canon material anyway. He's held and even fired guns in color spreads before, and he has used firearms in non-canon media like the Strongworld film, when the Straw Hats burst into Shiki's base and started just massacring everyone, my god. To me, that was always such a weird choice that they made, because here's what would happen if Luffy got a gun. It would be the same thing as what happened when he used the Nidai Kitetsu. He would grab the gun and then just keep punching people whilst holding the gun. In regards to women, Luffy has no concept of sexuality. However, Damara Black is very physically motivated. The first real Straw Hat that he encounters is Nami, who is coincidentally drinking at the same bar as him. So Damara Black sees her, puts on some Straw Hat jelly belly swagger, and makes a move on her. But Nami rejects him with a sentence that I find hilarious. "No thanks, I'm waiting for a man, and you are not that." I added that last bit in because I feel like it's implied. Nami also says, "I'll tell you one more time, I'm not going to drink with you. You're not good enough for me." Meanwhile, when Usopp rocks up on the next page, he gets an immediate face full of boob, showing us that the fakest of Luffys aren't even the fraction of a man that the realest of Usopps are. Damara Black is a podium character. He's a stage element that exists so that other characters can step on him and look better. In this case, Damara Black's first defeat is handed to him by Nami and Usopp. This is important because Nami and Usopp have always been portrayed as the weakest Straw Hats. On one occasion, Oda even stated that he always intends for Usopp to remain the weakest crew member. So Damara Black is a podium to show just how far Nami and Usopp have come. That this fake Luffy, who isn't weak by the way, he's a pretty decently powerful pirate. It's just that Nami and Usopp have come so far in their 2 years of training that the bar for Straw Hat has been raised impossibly out of grasp for the average pirate. And the idea is that if Nami and Usopp have grown this much, then just imagine how powerful everyone else has become. And it's all thanks to Mr. Podium. And while we've explored how Damara Black embodies the traits of established antagonists like Blackbeard and Buggy, there's an even more important antagonistic force that he definitely evokes. There's a point during the Return to Sabadi arc where Damara Black shoots innocent civilians for seemingly no good reason. He states that it's because he was searching searching for people who looks like those citizens, but he doesn't particularly care, and he even goes on to shoot the other person just because he can. He feels entitled to because of his status as Straw Hat Luffy. The word entitled being very important because this scene is eerily similar to how St. Charles behaved in the original Sabaody arc. Charles also encountered a couple and shot the man because he wanted to take the woman as one of his numerous slave wives. And just what were all of the rest of the Straw Hats doing while this was occurring, you ask? Well, in that very same chapter, Chopper was busy getting high with a starfish. So well done, Chopper. Well done. But I honestly don't see a huge difference between Charles and Damara Black in these respective moments. Both of them feel that their status gives them the right to treat people like objects and toy with them as they like. And in each case, it's unearned status as well, which is what completes Damara Black as the antithesis of Luffy, because the will of D is the enemy of the gods, aka the world nobles. So for Damara Black to truly contrast Luffy, Oda gave him the qualities of a budget-constrained world noble. But that doesn't stop him focusing on numbers, mate. He is all about numbers. For example, when a pirate worth 55 million berries tries to join his crew, Damara Black goes, "Nah, mate," and shoots him. Read the notice one more time. I only want people with bounties of at least 70 million berries. We're not accepting any captains below that level. I'm surprised you made it this far with a measly bounty like that. And I'd just like to point out that Damara Black's actual bounty is 26 million berries, so it's not even half of the bounty of the pirate that he shot. He even makes fake Frankie his bookkeeper to really hammer home those numbers, keeping track of all of the recruits and their individual bounties. He doesn't care about their qualities. What he sees are products with a price tag. Again, in the same way that the world nobles view anyone who isn't them. And to complete this comparison, Damara Black is so supremely focused on lineage, even if it's fake lineage. On multiple occasions, he proudly claims to be the son of Dragon the Revolutionary. In fact, I'm almost certain that Damara Black has said Dragon's name more in the 5 chapters he appears in than Luffy has in the entire rest of the series. Later on, Damara Black also adds that he is the grandson of Garp and has a 400 million berry bounty, putting a lot of weight onto his fake lineage that's supposed to grant him a divine right to rule over others. With all of that said, he does have one thing in common with Luffy, which is that Damara Black also cannot recognize people in mediocre disguises. Damara Black literally runs into the real Luffy, the man he's supposed to have studied to take on his identity. He even gets uncomfortably face-to-face close with Luffy and doesn't even begin to put those mental puzzle pieces together. And at the same time, the real Luffy doesn't recognize that Damara Black is trying to be him. It's a very fun interaction of two people claiming to be the same person, but having no idea that that's what the other one's actually doing. I also want to point out that Damara Black fits perfectly into the extended themes of Sabaody and the groundwork that both of those arcs lay for Egghead Island. It's very appropriate to explore the idea of copies and identities in an arc and at a location known for the first appearance of the Pacifista, who are copies of Bartholomew Kuma, albeit much more successful copies than Damara Black is of Luffy. There's also something to be said that Sentomaru is one of the only people who recognizes that, mate, this is not Luffy, which I like because Sentomaru is the Kuma clone wrangler. He has an eye for detail and can tell them all apart and can also do the same for Luffy, even though he's only met Luffy once. And look, it's not a major thread. I'm not going to claim that Damaro is some sort of masterpiece because of this. I just think it's worth noting how Oda meticulously groups these thematic elements together. But when everything is said and done, as well constructed as he is, Damara Black is undeniably a gag villain. And while those aren't uncommon in One Piece, it is extremely rare for them to be the major arc antagonist. In fact, the only other example I can think of that happening is Foxy, but as a result, Damara Black cannot be judged based simply on the basic criteria. For example, at no stage was he ever a threat. His motivation is pretty bland. He's too pathetic of a character to be compelling. He has no character arc, and he doesn't even have a particularly satisfying end either. Sentomaru thwacks him with an axe, he gets caught, and that's the last we've heard of him. Which I think is a shame, because there is so much potential for a cover story or a B-plot that focuses on the fake Straw Hats. They definitely fall into the category of wacky villains that don't quite hold their own arcs, but would make phenomenal side characters. But that is a fail for every category I would normally use to judge an antagonist. Theoretically, Damara Black should be the worst villain in the series, and yet he isn't. I think what really saves Damara Black is that he did not overstay his welcome. He got in and out in 5 chapters quickly and efficiently, performing all of his required functions, of which there were many, as we've explored, so he wasn't a haphazardly written goofball. He had a clear purpose to embody the direct antithesis of what Luffy is, as well as to become a bit of a petri dish of everything we're fighting against in this world. So it's honestly difficult not to call him a resounding success. It's just that his success, well, it wasn't very narratively ambitious. And I think characters should be rewarded for taking on higher challenges, even if they don't succeed at those more difficult challenges as much as Damara Black did with his easy difficulty setting. The bar for success was very low, but Damara Black well and truly cleared it. And I think the most appropriate tier for someone that that I would describe as underwhelming but very proficient would be a middling C tier. Now, one thing I should add is that this video was recorded and edited before chapter 1115 came out, which gave me exactly what I wanted, exactly what I felt was missing, which was the return of Damaro Black. Except with his official spelling now being Damalo, and instead of Luffy, he is now pretending to be Eustace Captain Kidd, which is a development that I love. It's not one that's really going to change the outcome of his positioning on this tier list, but I need it on the record that this man and his crew are still active, and I hope that we continue to follow his insanity well into the future. I definitely think that he could have been more, but he isn't, and here we are. Or in this specific case, here we were. Because the best thing about Damaro Black is that he and the fake Straw Hats have their own theme song called We Were, which is a very poorly sung rendition of the classic intro, We Are. But you let me know in the comments which antagonist you'd like to see ranked next.